Welcome, everyone. Happy Saturday. Hope y'all are doing okay. My name is Gaetan, and today we are going to dive into our weekly meeting on Congo Unfiltered. And thanks again for tuning on, Friends of the Congo, whether you are watching this on our YouTube channel, subscribe if you haven't, on our X accounts on Facebook, and also on Instagram. She'll be live right now as well. So thank you all for being here. And whether you're listening again from Kinshasa, the diaspora in the US, here in Europe, or anywhere in the global south or anywhere around the world. And this space exists for one reason, honestly, it's to talk about the Congo, it's to talk about global powers, is to talk about um, is to talk about injustice, to talk about immigration without filters, without shortcuts, and without forgetting history, right? And today's episode is going to be necessary, I will say. We are living in a really delicate moment for those who are in the US, for those who are in the Congo, in Europe, and global south. And shout out to the people of Venezuela right now. So we're living in a moment when truth is often, I would say, buried beneath diplomacy, sanitized headlines, or sometimes dismissed because it is not politically correct or because it is too political, right? But here on Congo Unfiltered, we do not look away. We tackle issues, we tackle um, conversation, debates. We welcome debates, and also we present things because we really don't want to look away, and we want to dig in. We want to dig in and go to the roots of the issue. So today we'll be speaking, or I will be speaking about two things that are often treated as separate, but I deeply, deeply, deeply believe that are connected. Um, Today is day 10 on our journey toward our campaign toward Lumumba's Day, who was assassinated. He was the very first prime minister of the Congo, and he was assassinated um, on January 17th, 1961. So we will we will begin to talk about Patrice Lumumba, the father of Congolese independence, and and how his memory still really threatens those who benefit from African silence, right? And then we are going to examine a document that most of the world will never read, and it's really like that. Like twice a year, the UN publish a report. The UN group of experts publish a report, a midterm and then the final one. And those reports usually when they're published is really, it's really quietly when they are submitted, when they're published, right, to the Security Council. And the last one was the midterm report was published on December 30th, 2025. Do not ask me why it's called midterm, but it is called midterm report, December 30th, 2025. Um, and it's over 100 pages, technical, bureaucratic, but really it is using a cautious language um, when that document contains story of war, story of minerals, story of foreign occupation, and really how international law, just like I've talked about last week. And if you haven't watched the episode last week, after this, whenever you have time, go back, watch that one. The concept of sovereignty and how international law guarantees sovereignty for any nation. And that report shows the betrayal of that sovereignty. And this is the UN report they hope you won't read. So buckle up. This is going to be a really great episode. Um, so like I was saying, the January is Lumumba's month, and Friends of the Congo here, we do honor and we celebrate the man that he was, the leader that he was, And the month of January is really a time when Congolese people and Pan-Africanists, not just Friends of the Congo, honor that man. And um, and it is a man who didn't just, I would say, demand um, independence. He actually defined it. And last week I read to you guys his speech, right? Incredible speech um, about him, about how he stood up in front of the King Baudouin. It's not what I wanted to show. Uh, yes, there you go. In front of the King Baudouin of Belgium to essentially define or remind the Congolese people what sovereignty is, that sovereignty does not ask for permission. He did not wait for Belgium to approve his nationhood, and even though technically it was, but he reminded the folks that there are folks who died for it, that are folks that um, struggled, that fought for it, that died and struggled to force Belgium to finally approve it. He didn't ask Washington how far his dignity could go. He was assassinated, right? And today, more than 60 years later, Lumumba is still feared. And I talked about that last week. Uh, and not just feared, but I would also say mocked. He's feared, not just remembered, because he represents what Africa could have become. Seriously, think about that. And his death prevented a potential future, what Africa could have been, what Congo could have been. So there is something very interesting, and I always want to use what's going on in the world right now. It's the African Cup of Nation. And last week, Congo got kicked out. We lost against Algeria 1-0. I think it was an extra time that Algeria player scored. I don't remember who that was. And it was really a sad moment because you could see, especially for that man who was standing still for the entire game, and he was really sad. And the part that was really disturbing was, for example, the player after the game, right? And I'm just gonna show you what happened and how that was, and I found it really disturbing. So they just scored, right? Algeria, they just scored, and that's at the end, or maybe when they just scored. Extra time. There's probably like a couple minutes left, and this is what he does. Look at it again. Mocking Lumumba's, well, it's not Lumumba, but the dude is actually paying tribute to Lumumba by standing still, just like there is a statue of Lumumba in the Congo, and he's making fun of him and collapsing, right? And quickly, and including myself, I was like, people perhaps don't know who Lumumba was. And not just who Lumumba was, because we're talking about Algeria, it's an Algerian player, but also the role of Algeria. The role that Algeria played in the anti-colonial war. Because Algeria became a hub of Pan-African liberation. They were supporting anti-apartheid movement, and you will hear, for example, that folks would go to Algeria to get training. Nelson Mandela with the ANC would get military training because they needed to defend themselves against the apartheid regime in Algeria. Algeria was this bubble where African leaders and activists will meet, strategize, talk, train themselves, educate themselves. Algeria was hosting exile leaders. And like I mentioned, with the case of Mandela, providing arms and training. So when this player is mocking Lumumba, it is somehow a continuity, or it ends to the tradition of how Algeria stood next to African leaders, African people. And that to me was shameful, but the player was not just called out by Black people. The player was also called out by Algerians themselves, Arabs themselves. It turned out that Amorim was mocking the fam, not celebrating a very, very, very bad act. He needs to come out and apologize for his behavior. Great respect to Lumumba and the Congolese people. You are our brother, and all of our thoughts to Congo and its people who are suffering so many injustices at this moment. That's Babi 1. Before it was A5 Meds V or Ahmedov. Rudeness and lack of respect and profound ignorance of history and the suffering peoples from persecution. The strange thing is that there are those who promote the celebratory aspect and circle the video as if it were strength and toughness against the opponent. And you can see the emoji of, wanting to throw up. And that's Basma calling out the Algerian player. And that to me was also significant. And that's why, to me, recent AFCON moments struck so deeply. That a Congolese fan can stand in a stadium dressed like Lumumba, silent, unmoving, a statue of memory in a space usually reserved for spectacle, right? But suddenly that was too political. People won't even break down who the guy was imitating or who Lumumba is. But we, as Friends of the Congo, we every year we remember, we remind folks, we commemorate who Lumumba is. And see, let me still show you this, guys. Hold on. And that's why we, let me see, where is it? And that's why, Friends of the Congo, we commemorate every single year Lumumba, and we invite you all to Join us. And we do that every single year. For 17 days, we remind folks who Lumumba was, the values that he stood for. So we're gonna have events this year again, and you can I'll invite you guys to pre-order the graphic novel of Maman Bibiane, Lumumba the Freedom Fighter. It's you go to lumumbaday.org, lumumbaday.org. And this year, let me just read that to you. Congolese, Pan-Africanists, and people of goodwill thoughts the globe have launched throughout the globe have launched a campaign to declare January 17th as Lumumba Day. Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, Sports and Youth Minister Joseph Okita, and the Vice President of the Senate Maurice Mbolo were assassinated on January 17, 1961. This year, 2026, we are highlighting the remarkable film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. That's an amazing film. Y'all, you need to go and watch that movie, that documentary, connecting jazz, the American music industry, activism, and the Congo. Fascinating how American people, there are some, just like we saw, who are ignorant and they are literally being used to essentially uh, oppress the Congolese people, mock the Congolese people, but you also see in the soundtrack of the coup d'etat American people who still were fighting or embracing the idea that Lumumba had. African American, white people, whether it is in New York. Fascinating documentary. So, yes, go ahead, if you can pre-order the graphic novel Lumumba the Freedom Fighter and also the documentary or the film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which document the period of Lumumba's assassination. We are encouraging supporters to attend a screening of the film or contact us at info@friendsofthecongo.org. So please pre-order the book Lumumba's the Freedom Fighter, because that's really critical to kind of the journey of understanding who Lumumba was, right? And why, when Friends with the Congo, when we are talking about a liberated Congo, we're talking about a liberated Congo through the lens of Patrice Lumumba. A liberated Congo that does not wait for the approval of someone in Washington, D.C., Paris, or Brussels, or Vienna, or Rome, right? And so lumumbaday.org, go ahead and go and watch and pre-order the graphic novel and attend screening movie, or if you want to even host one, you should definitely do it, and we will see how we can support you into creating that events where you are locally. So I think it's very interesting when you look at the life of Lumumba. And we have this Isai Dasombo Taosa, later known as Patrice Lumumba, was born in Onalua, Kasai province in Belgium in 1925. Excuse me. July 2nd, that we also um, celebrate Lumumba's birthday. And his parents were Francois Tolenga and Julienne Amato Lumenja, farmers, and they had four siblings. In his youth, Lumumba spoke five languages. He spoke five languages: Tetela, Swahili, French, Lingala, and Chiluba. And before I kind of like transition to to the second part of today's episode, there is, again, still like can't keep, you know, playing in my head the clips or the conversation that I had with brother Kambale Musavuli, uh, who essentially was sharing with me Patrice Lumumba's vision. Take a listen.
What did Lumumba tell us? Africa will write its own history, and it's going to be to the north and the south of Sahara, a history of glory. And what is that history? It's the peoples to peoples connection. At this moment, Congolese should be connecting with the Kenyans who are challenging Ruto in court to find out how are the Kenyans able to challenge the government of signing an illegal accord in Washington, because the president of Congo signed an illegal accord for Congo, right? So we should unite under a Pan-African label of finding out what other Africans are doing for sovereignty at this time, to be able to challenge the elites of the Congo, the regional elites, and the global elites who want access to our mineral resources at the detriment of the human beings living on the land.
And that was Brother Kambale Musavuli. And there is, well, Nigeria faced Algeria today, and I was kind of upset a little bit, like just every other Congolese, and I was like, man, this is so disrespectful. Like, Lumumba was a great man, not just for the Congo, but also for Africa, because of what he's um because of what he stood for, right? Because of his idea of sovereignty, his idea of liberation, not just for the Congolese people, but for African people. So I was upset, not gonna lie. And I posted, all right, need to be transparent, and I said, Patrice Lumumba was Africa's most uncompromising anti-colonial leader, assassinated in 1961 with Western backing because he refused to submit Congo to foreign control. That Congolese fan wasn't provoking. So the guy dressed as Lumumba, I always forget his name. He was honoring African dignity and sovereignty by simply staying still the entire game. So mocking that person, mocking that fan is mocking African history. And I said, Nigeria, please do your thing. I was really being petty. Um, and well, Nigeria did the thing. I'm sorry for Algeria. Great people, great nation, great African team. But for this one, I was like, no. I want to rule. I'm gonna support Nigeria, and I have a lot of Nigerian friends too. So I was like, hey y'all, I'm gonna be stop, with the attack, stop with making fun of the Congo, because we lost. It's okay. Um, at least we are closer to going to the World Cup. So I teased them like that, right? But I was like, but hey, don't worry. Like let's make peace, because I'm gonna rule. I'm gonna root for you against Algeria, and Algeria won. And there is this player that, not sure who that was, but he essentially was paying tribute to Lumumba. Really fascinating how soccer or football can transcend borders and sometimes even invite politics into that. To me, it's fascinating that this fan was able to rekindle and bring the conversation outside of the football fields about Lumumba. And that brings us to the next topic about the UN report. The UN report that they hope that you don't read. Because I mentioned in my introduction that on December 30th, 2025, that the UN group of experts, so it's a group of folks appointed to draft reports talk to folks on the ground, witness, document, write, and submit a report to the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council. So most people will never read it, man. Honestly, like, I understand, can sound boring, and most media will really reduce that report into a few vague paragraphs. It's easier, right? But that report or those reports matter. Those reports matter. And the specific report that I'm going to talk about, it does not just describe a war winding down like President Trump's trying to convince folks by saying, hey, we signed a peace accord. There is peace now. When a few days later, after the December 4th signature, the city of Uvira fell, was captured by the Rwanda Defense Force. The report describes a war being normalized. Because when you even read, and I've done that exercise with you all, you read the report. Thanks for Bombastic Elements for retweeting us, sharing this stream. And you read the report, or the deal, the peace deal, so-called peace deal. We are normalizing the occupation because there isn't a language about really entirely redrawing, forcing the Rwanda Defense Force to even withdraw from the Congo. There is not a language that is calling what they're doing an occupation, an invasion. It calls the presence of 4,000 to 10,000 Rwandan defense troops on Congolese soil a defensive measure. And we discussed that. We broke it down. So the report is describing a war being normalized, that a foreign back-armed control, it is normalizing the erosion of Congolese sovereignty that Lumumba fought for. It is normalizing the transformation of that violence. How the violence that we see with having 7 million people, Congolese people, displaced, when we have mass rape occurring. There are children being killed and enrolled into the Rwandan-backed militias, right? Let's not forget that a couple years ago, the U.S. under the Children Soldier Act sanctioned or included, I'm probably going to use the correct word, the I think it's Soldier Prevention, Child Soldier Prevention Act. Let me see. Yes, Child Soldiers Prevention Act. And you see the appearance of Rwanda for the first time in a decade. Why? Because the Rwandan government is supporting an armed groups that is forcibly recruiting children. And the US government cannot be providing armed assistance or military assistance to a country that is actively recruiting children. But something very interesting, at the beginning of the year, the Trump administration removed both Rwanda and Congo from that list. So it's like, we're not going to talk about justice, because if we talk about justice, we need to punish Rwanda or Congo. Congo also is not, the Congo's government also, there's a lot to be said about Congo, I'm not going to lie. So you're not going to talk about justice, so you're just going to remove both of their names. And that's what happened early 2025 under President Trump. So there are normalizing. So the report talks about how a violence occurring in the Congo, in the heart of Africa, is being normalized, is being turned into an economic or transformed into an economic system that is profiting the Congolese elite, that is profiting the Rwandan elite, that is profiting the United States, not the American people, but the corporate, the multinationals, and the American elite again. So, despite the peace agreements in Doha, we've seen it between the Congolese government and the M23. Besides the peace agreements in Luanda between Congo and Rwanda, Luanda is a city in Angola, Luanda. So the peace agreement between Congo and Rwanda of Paul Kagame. And then the Nairobi process as well, that is also supposed to include other armed groups, including the M23. So despite this peace agreement, despite the public gestures of ceasefires, just like we've seen in the case of Gaza and Israel, ceasefire on the paper, but reports tell a different story. That in 2025, the conflict intensified across North and South Kivu, with the beginning of the year starting in January with the invasion of Goma. And again, invasion by who? Rwanda. And then later, South Kivu with Bukavu. And military operations there quickly escalated, right? Even during official ceasefires. And then that armed group that the M23 expanded. Let me see if I can share even the report. So that's the report that we're discussing. That armed groups expanded essentially the control. That the M23 expanded the control. And you can read it right here. AFC, and that's the introduction, expanding its military campaign in North and South Kivu with sustained support from and operation coordination with the Rwanda Defense Force, combining coordinated offensives, strategic deployment, and preparation for further operations. Spoofing and jamming technology continue to be employed by RDF, disrupting navigation system and communication. And I talked about how some of those technology came from Israel. That was mentioned in previous report, and how the UN or group of experts questioned the government of Israel. How does the M23 has Israeli technology? We all know how. They got it from Rwanda. After consolidating control around Goma, AFC, M23, and RDF focused on neutralizing FDLR, conducting operation marked by heavy clashes and widespread systematic targeting of civilians, in particular Hutu inhabited area of Bwito and Buisha. So the Congolese state or the Congolese government did not regain territory after the peace agreement, after the June 27th, 2025, after the December 4th agreement of 2025. The Congolese government has not regained a single territory. It has lost more. And we see a pattern there. ceasefire declared, and the report says that military positioning begins because we have a ceasefire. So both parties use the time to get more weapons, get more ammunition, position the troops into more or different strategic locations. And then the negotiations continue while really the reality is getting worse. And that's kind of like what people have always said when talking about Paul Kagame's around that. They say that there was a fight and talk. Like we are talking, but we are going to continue to fight on the ground. That's not diplomacy. That's a delay tactics that you want to make sure that you are continuing to move your pawn or your pieces forward while talking, while negotiating. And that's the same tactics that we see in the Middle East with Israel. It is the same tactic that we see in Sudan. That really you cannot talk about peace without disarmament, without silencing once and for all the guns. You cannot talk about peace when warlords, those who are the heads of those armed groups, are still there. You cannot talk about peace when you don't have the most important component of peace, which is justice. Because once you create an illusion of peace, because like Brother Kambale said the other day, that there is not a mechanism in place to implement peace. Not in those agreements that were signed, because we do have laws in the books. Public Law 109, 456, Section 105. That gives the authority to Secretary Rubio, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to withdraw like funds, aid to any government that is destabilizing the Congo, given the fact that there is sufficient evidence. We've had evidence for decades now, right? So the report here really is trying to highlight the M23, highlights the AFC, Alliance du Fleuve Congo, that was described and is being described as a rebel groups. I won't even say rebel. I will just use the term terrorist group, armed groups, Rwanda-backed terrorist group. And somehow they are evolving. The M23 is morphing into a state, a parallel state, a shadow state. Because they have, in a few months or a few years, created administrative zones. They now have their own tax systems. They even have local enforcement that are terrorizing Congolese people. They also have a judiciary-like enforcement unit. So the M23 right now, because we saw there were some protests, youth came out in the city of Goma protesting against Rwanda, protesting against the M23. They were arrested. What happened to them, God knows. Probably killed. probably still in jail, probably tortured. And something very disturbing happened at the same time because you heard Congolese folks on that one X Space, Jamais trahir le Congo by Binza, and you heard or you could hear some people, whether they're doing that in that space or simply tweeting or posting, blaming the Congolese people for coming out. And oh my God, there is this beautiful response from Mama Benedict, an activist, teacher, and activist, who was essentially giving a lesson like, we cannot think that Congolese people don't know what is good for them. Even to paraphrase Pope Francis, may his soul rest in peace, and he said that the people, they know what is, they are inspired, that people as a nation, as human being, are inspired to know what is good for them. So when you see people coming out in mass protesting, it's because they know what they have to do. It's because they know what is good for them. Let me see if I can find that tweet. I think I liked it from Maman Benedict Njoko. If you're watching this, Maman Benedict, I am sending you positive vibe and speed recovery and all the love. Oh, can I just go to her accounts? Let me see. Oh my God. Let me see. Give me a second. Um, and oh my God, I can't find her. I cannot find her. Okay. Oh, I did. Okay, cool. Give me a second, guys. This is live. Um, I liked it. I really thought that I liked the her tweets. I'm really confused why I cannot find it. Um, yeah, I found it. Let me see if I can share this. This was beautiful because I was, you know, following the whole threads, and I'm gonna provide context, honestly. Um, so for context, there was her tweet first, and she says, "Smother manifestation in Goma, protests in Goma. The repression has lifted the mask. We didn't see an assured authority, but an anxious occupation regime incapable of tolerating the slightest narrative crack. And they announced freedom to us, the freedom to smother every dissenting voice." And then somebody else, I'm not going to mention that person, says, "They are criminals and we didn't need this dangerous manipulation to prove it. The young people who made announcement on social media are more preoccupied with their ambitions than with the fates of our families." And then she responds, "Even if you disapprove of these young people, that does not justify either the arrest or the repression. Civil rights do not depend on the opinion one has of people. Redirecting our anger from the one who holds the weapon to the one who does not have them will never help us. And he continues, but I'm just going to stop there and then her response, and I'm going to share that with you all. Let me see. And her response, she named that person. Anyways, Jean Maubert. Oh, I need to translate that for you all. There you go. And she said, Jean Robert, I would like to say that perhaps it's time that we stop treating our people like children. People are responsible individuals capable of assessing a situation, weighing the risk, and making choices. If some people have decided to answer calls, that choice is theirs. Respecting it, even if we don't agree with it, is the foundation of our political ethics, in my opinion. Furthermore, what does accusing these people accomplish? Speaking from the outside is not without its cost. I still remember the long months my father spent in remained in hospital because Mobutu henchmen broke both his ankle after severely beating him. Many of those who speak out still have family there, exposed to pressure, I cannot pronounce that, reprisals, and fear. The risk isn't eliminated, it is displaced. It becomes diffuse, silence, but very real. It must also be clearly stated that political exile is not comfortable, even if you are eating potatoes, admitting that you may never be able to return to your country because of what you say, what you defend is not insignificant. Being deprived of your homes, your dead, your roots, is a form of symbolic death, an irreversible loss that few accept lightly. I believe we must stop creating false divisions that serve those who oppress us. Struggles are never won when they fragment solidarity. They are won when they articulate the voices from within and those from without, when they refuse to prioritize political dignity based on geography. Reducing legitimacy to physical proximity is to confuse courage with exposure, and that is morally questionable. What we should be examining is not the intentions of those who speak or amplify the words, but the reality that compels them to speak, a violence that makes silence impossible here as elsewhere. That was Mama Benedict Njoko, and if you're on X, go and give her a follow. Literally, literally. And I agree with with that statement that people are being oppressed right now. They are living under occupation. The civilians report coercions. They report extortion. They report death. They report surveillance. The leaders are being replaced, whether it is traditional leaders, governors. The mines are directly administered to M23 authorities, and even folks that you like. I did not know you were Congolese. In few videos and other places, you seem to present yourself as a national from another country. Now you are the governor or vice governor of the Congo, of a city in the Congo, right? So all of this, the M23 is able to do all of this, and I mentioned about Israel somehow providing weapons to Rwanda, and Rwanda providing weapons back to those terrorist group. So them being able to occupy the Congo, part of it, them being able to defeat the South African force, them being able to defeat the United Mission, military mission in the Congo, MONUSCO, that would have never been possible without ammunition supply lines, without fuel, without communications, without organized logistic, right? And also, to some extent, very important, the support of external states. So, what is the role that countries within NATO play into that? When you have Poland signing a military agreement with Rwanda, when you have Turkey signing military agreements with Rwanda, when you have the United States providing funding and shielding Rwanda from any sort of accountability, when you have European Union nations continuing to fund Rwanda, and when you have the United Nations avoiding to name Rwanda directly, just like we have seen in the report in the peace agreement, a peace agreement that refused to call Rwanda an occupier, that refused to talk about the presence of Rwanda Defense Force deep in Congolese territory, even if it's an inch in Congolese territory, as a violation of Congolese sovereignty, as an invasion. They refuse to name Rwanda, but the implications here is very undeniable. I'm not sure why there are even people out there that will continue to say that Rwanda is not involved. It's impossible that you're going to have a local militia that can operate with a level of sophistication that even the UN says that they possess, the M23 possess weapons that are far superior than the UN. Can you imagine that? And that will happen without a sponsor. There is absolutely no way you can convince me that nations that are contributing to the UN, buying weapons for the UN, sending troops in the Congo within the UN forces, that those weapons somehow are less sophisticated than the weapons that the M23 has without a state sponsor. Where do they get the money? We should stop calling M23 as a rebel groups. It's not a rebellion, it's an occupation. Do you call what's happening in Gaza a rebellion, or you call it an occupation? So why are we trying to twist and change word when it comes to the Congo? Is it because it's in Africa? Is it because we talk about Black lives? It's an occupation. There is an occupying force backed by states, funded by states, and we need to name them. And I think perhaps the most heartbreaking section was the forced recruitment in that report. In 2025, young men and even boys were systematically taken during the so called security sweeps. So, paragraph 22, systematic forced recruitment intensified in all areas under AFC and M23 occupation. Men and underage boys were systematically rounded up, often under the pretext of identity verification or security operation, and forcibly recruited. Recruitment campaign during public rallies calling for voluntarily conscription also continued. And I showed a video the other last year, was last year actually, but it was a few months ago, of the M23 presenting the new recruits, about 7,000 of new recruits. And at that time, I asked folks to be careful that these were not volunteers. And the report confirms that now. Men and underage boys were systematically rounded up, often under the pretext of identity verification or security operations, forcibly recruited. Forcibly recruited. So you have folks that disappeared, folks that were killed, and others were trained under duress. And I said 7,000. The UN actually said on October 1st, it announced the graduation of an additional 9,350 commandos at the Chanzu Training Center. So on September 14th, the AFC M23 publicized the pass out of 7,437 commandos. And then in October, 9,000 commandos. The group could not independently corroborate these figures. Why are you training commandos if you want peace or if you had signed a peace agreement? So the social consequences here are very, very, very devastating because we talk about families the same way that we saw and we discuss here how the Rwanda Defense Force is sending troops in the Congo and they are losing them in numbers by hundreds. Mass graves, you see families in Rwanda cannot even mourn the death because officially it's a covert operation. They're not supposed to be in the Congo. In Congo, families also are losing the son, farmers. So that's why when we talk about the war, we need to be very intentional and careful with the word that we use because the people of Rwanda and the people of Congo are losing. They are the one impacted. They are the one dying. The elites is benefiting, both the elites in Rwanda and the elites in the Congo, and you add a third person, the elites in the US. But really, the families are the one losing because they see youth are being militarized. You can't even improve the economic condition of the people of the Congo. The Congolese government cannot do that. And the M23 is definitely not do it. We saw the conversation with Maman Benedicte. Her tweets, people protesting because they are not liberated. So we can see how a war can really tear the fabric of a society. You don't necessarily need to bomb villages. And Denis Mukwege, Dr. Denis Mukwege, the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize, he talked about it when he received his Nobel Peace Prize. You don't need to bomb villages. The Runback militia has done that. We have talked about that, Friends of the Congo. You don't need to bomb villages, though they have done it, to destroy them. You can simply take the sons, enroll them, forcibly recruit them in the military, or if you call it military. You can rape the women, the girls, and sometimes in front of the families, in front of the husband, in front of the brothers, parents, fathers, to destroy the society. Because the UN reports meticulously documents summary execution, literally. Let me see where they say that. Paragraph 25. High rates of desertion reflected persistent challenges faced by M23 in consolidating loyalty among its rank, compelling it to ensure command and control primarily through coercive means. Attempted desertion or refusal to comply with orders, in particular at training sites such as Rumangabo and Chanzu, led to the inhumane punishment and summary execution. And if you escape, sometimes they catch you because again they need you, right? They will force you to endure hunger, untreated illness, and physical abuse or torture. And I say that. I will say that those who are lucky died because they're killed. If it's a sudden death, you are lucky. And that's the barbarity of this whole situation. If you're lucky, you have a sudden death. If you're unlucky, you're tortured. You are physically abused. You're dying of hunger. Let me see. The group interviewed victims of arrest who had witnessed torture, inhuman treatment, including detainees stripped naked and held without food and water, and summary execution in detention centers in Goma. That is coming from a movement that claims to have liberated the Congo or wanting to liberate the Congo because they said that they have liberated those part of the country, Goma, Bukavu, the eastern part of the Congo, Bunagana for years now. Does that sound like liberation to you? Entire villages burned. Paragraph 38. Let's read it. Let's read it together because you're probably not going to have the time to do it. So I'm going to do it for you. That's okay. Many locations targeted were agricultural fields managed by FDLR, and that's what they're saying, FDLR and affiliates, in and around Virunga National Park. I'm going to pause there. Like, how do they even know they're FDLR? I don't think the FDLR goes around with ID that says, hey, I'm FDLR. That would be stupid, right? So how do they know that they're FDLR? Do they consider everyone fighting against M23 FDLR? Are they considering anyone being Hutu in the Congo being FDLR? Are they considering people fleeing and not wanting to join the M23 military ranks as FDLR? How do they know that there are FDLR? There is no there is no ID that says that this person is FDLR, right? But it says there, right? I'm just gonna read it. Many locations targeted were agricultural. What's going on? Okay. Location targeted were agricultural fields managed by FDLR and affiliates in and around Virunga National Park, such as Mozambique and Kazaro, which were also targeted in the past. Is that what I wanted to read? I think so. RDF and M23 forces carried out summary execution, arbitrary arrest and detention, and the deliberate destruction and burning of civilian infrastructure. This is a war crime. This is a war crime, including homes and villages, triggering the mass displacement of civilians. So there you have it. village burning, mass displacement, blocked humanitarian aid, entire towns, Buisha, Buito, Masisi, emptied. Markets completely collapsed. Food chain shattered. And because of the jamming spoofing system, because of the fact that you can't land in Goma or anywhere, the international aid really cannot get in, trapping entire population into dying of hunger or controlling what comes in Goma. So they're probably going to get foods and other goods from Rwanda, forcing families to ask for money for their people or family in the diaspora, going through Rwandan banks to get money because the stupid government of Congo decided that, you know what, we're going to close those banks. We're not going to pay folks in the Congo, in Goma, in this occupied region. Let's just abandon them. Let use our people as a bargaining chip. So civilians in this instance are being made invisible in what appears to be a really political conversation because the Congolese government right now wants to stay in power. The roundabout militia wants to be in power, and the suffering of the people are being ignored. And that is why we say that the story is being repeating itself. That when you look back into the Congo Free State or the Algerian War or the British in Kenya or NATO in Libya or the IDF in Gaza, civilian targeting has always been really, I will say, the quiet yet the most important centerpiece of an imperial warfare. That the report published on December 30th confirms what we at Friends of the Congo have been saying, confirm what Congolese people themselves, because we are only amplifying the voices of the Congolese people. You are listening to me today because there is a platform. I'm speaking, Friends of the Congo, through this platform is amplifying my voice. So the Congolese people are already speaking about what's going on to them because they're on the front line. And they're telling you that this war is not about ethnicity. It's not about Tutsis or Banyamulenge. It's not about tribes. It's about resources. It's about gold. It's about coltan, lithium, cassiterite, wolframite. It's about cobalt. The lifeblood of your smartphone, if you have one. Not just iPhone, Samsung, Motorola, whatever phone you can think of, your electric vehicle battery, your laptop. That is what this war is about. And that's why a group of committed citizens over 10 years ago called the death of Congolese people the calculated, planned death of Congolese people for resources, genocide, genocide for economic gain. Because you're gonna see militia seizing mining zones. They say they want to liberate the Congo, but they go and somehow attack first zones that are rich in minerals, extracts minerals, sell them through middlemen, and often London. I mean, we've seen that document talks like report talk about it. Those resources are laundered through Rwanda. Read Global Witness reports, multiple reports on Rwanda. Read the reports called Impacts on Gold. And you're going to understand why this war is being fueled, why this war is being sustained. It is a self sustaining loop. Profit, war, displacement, profit. Again, that the war does not stop the supply chain, which means that the supply chain depends on the war. Because if a supply chain is not disrupted, then something is wrong. How come children cannot go to school during the war, but somehow engineers can go and workers can go and dig in the mines? How can you explain that to me? The people cannot go in the market and buy food, but trucks can come and load minerals and ship them and drive them to the port or to whatever train station so they can be sent to Pennsylvania in the United States, so they can be sent in the EU, European Union. If the supply chain is not disrupted, if people continue to make profit, it means that they are definitely profiting from the war. That the global economy runs on Congolese suffering. Because that Congolese suffering is clear about who the aggressor is. When people are being killed, when people are being silenced, they name the perpetrator. But the reports cautiously but clearly confirms that the Rwanda Defense Force, the RDF, continues to operate on Congolese soil, coordinating with the M23. They have been saying that for months, for years. Yet, no sanctions, no peace, no withdrawal of the troops, no international outcry. Maybe for a few weeks, headlines, and that's it. So ask yourself, what if it were really the other way around? Like, what if Congo invaded Rwanda? What if would the world be silent? I think here we are witnessing the hypocrisy of the global governance that is basing their entire existence on this notion of international law. There's even a joke. It's a joke. Somebody tweet, "You want to hear a joke? International law." Because what we see in a global governance, even within the African Union, even within the United Nations, we see might makes right, that the powerful define the rules now, that the powerful now can condition sovereignty, that silence is, but we need to remind them that silence in that instances is not neutrality, that we cannot ignore the occupation that is going on in the Congo. Just like we cannot ignore the occupation going on in Gaza, just like we cannot ignore the occupation happening in Ukraine, just like we cannot ignore occupation happening to any country where the sovereignty is being violated. Occupation cannot be rebranded as stabilization. It is not up to a foreign country to decide what should be done, what should happen to the resources of a country being invaded. The United States deciding what to do with Venezuelan oil, deciding to what to do with Congolese cobalt, lithium, and then that the head of X, the CEO of X, saying that we will cool whoever we want for lithium. A few years ago, we tweeted that. We will coup, we will remove whoever we want, whatever leader that will not 100% bend the knee so that we can get what we need for the green energy transition. We will remove them. Who is we? So back to the UN, what does really the UN report said about the Congo? It says that the Congo is being carved. We knew that. Not governed. That the sovereignty of the Congo is being negotiated, not respected. We know that. You can read those elements line by line, not just in this report, but also in the peace agreements. That the peace is being spoken, it's being advertised, but it's not being practiced because there is not a single mechanism for justice to enforce or impose peace. That the people continue to suffer. The house being burned down, like we read, the properties being burned out, themselves being killed, being tortured, being starved. And all of that happened when minerals continue to flow in Western countries. And just to go back to the introduction, because we are in day 10 of us remembering Lumumba, us trying to commemorate or to remind people who Lumumba was, right? What he stood for. Let me see if I can show you what we posted for today, for day 10, about Lumumba as we are wrapping up. The assassination of Patrice Lumumba signal to African American artist, activist, and organizer in the developing international consciousness, the length that the US and its allies were willing to go to maintain neo-colonial repression. This led to an intensification of an anti-racist action in all sectors of resistance, from the rhetoric of Malcolm X to the portrait of Langston Hughes. 17 days of Lumumba, day 10, today. So, as Lumumba once warned all of us in his testament, in his last letter, not just to Congolese people, but to any oppressed nation in the world, in the global south, that the day will come when history will speak and Africa will write its own history. And in both North and South, it will be a history of glory and dignity. That day will come, and that day must still come. And until then, we will speak what many, many, many refuse to say. What many, many, many people are afraid to say. That the war in the Congo continues. That there is no peace in the Congo. That foreign states fuel it. Multinational corporations benefit from it. And that no reports, no matter how hidden they are, can silence the truth forever. So until then, until peace comes, until we actually see justice, we will continue to speak and we will continue to uplift and amplify the voices of those in the front line. So thank you also for listening. I'm going to redirect you guys to our lumumbaday.org page, lumumbaday.org, to pre-order Maman Justine, Maman Bibiane, sorry, um, book about Patrice Lumumba. It's called Lumumba the Freedom Fighter. Pre-order the book. Pre-order the book. It is going to be a really great opportunity for you to know or understand the struggle of Patrice Lumumba. So, you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. You're watching us on X, follow us. You're watching us on Instagram, follow us. And share every content that you see about the Congo, because sharing the contents that amplifies the condition of an oppressed nation, of the Congolese people, what they're going through, is really amplifying the voice and the narrative of any oppressed nation, because the system is the same. The system of oppression is the same. So follow us, stay tuned to how you can continue to help Friends of the Congo in its mission to raise global consciousness about the Congo, about the issue of the Congo. So until then, stay safe, stay loud, and stay unfiltered. So it was a pleasure to see you, to talk to you this Saturday, like every Saturday, and I will see you next week. Ciao.